Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. We did it! First place at BCS France, the World Championship in France. I guess some people call it Nationals. And I did it with this quite creative deck, I would say. So before people say, oh, NLK, yeah, it is NLK. I am aware Assassin should absolutely be limited, but especially once you see this build and maybe a short tournament report at the end. Now, before I get into it, I do want to do some shout outs. First of all, Team Excelsior, my local teammates. Secondly, Bram and Brandon from my locals. They actually got me 4 cards that were very important for this deck at the last minute because an online shop didn't deliver in time. So thank you for saving my booty. Third, Noman, my testing partner from America. We did so many damn testing games. It's insane what he had to put up with for me. So thank you so much for that as well. 4, Chris from Different Fight and other people who were just going nuts on Messenger, supporting me, rooting for me all across the globe. So thank you so much for that. And then finally, of course, you guys, subscribers, people who support me, just that support has been super important to me. With that being said, let's get into this first place BCS deck list. So before we do any list talk, the most important thing is the philosophy behind the build. Essentially, for the longest time, I was considering bringing Luard. The current premium meta landscape, from what I saw, was you had Luard, Ange, Guise and NLK as the top dogs, let's say. I believed Luard could get me this win, but my one glaring problem was NLK. Yes, you can rush them if you're quite lucky, but if they are luckier, you die. So the problem is that you needed some level of luck to beat NLK, and I did not want to rely on luck to do so. So the idea behind the deck is essentially there is only one thing that can beat NLK, and it is a faster NLK. If you bring a regular deck, a regular meta deck to a big tournament, you are starting from the assumption that everyone will play flawlessly. You should. At top tables or in top 8, you should assume everyone plays flawlessly. And so if you're then in a mirror with very, very similar decks playing flawlessly, the end result is RNG decides who really gets that highest spot. And I won the top 3 to get to Worlds. So with that being said, the idea behind the deck is if you want to beat NLK, you have to be a faster NLK. So now we can get into the actual list. So for starters, basically Vermilion Gatekeeper. I know some people like to start on Enigmatic Assassin because then you already have an Assassin in Soul, right? Well, the thing is, this deck wants to be at 13 Soul the second you ride Grade 3. Yeah, more on that later. And so by starting with Vermilion Gatekeeper, you are already adding 1 card to your hand, which will soul charge, by the way. You're already adding 1 extra soul. Now we get into the actual spice of the list. We run 12 draw triggers. Why? This list was started with every single assumption deleted. So, oh, I need to run heals. Oh, I need to run the stand cat. Oh, I need to run Stridefolder. No, you delete all of that. And then you see what is my win con and how do I get there. Essentially, a draw trigger, when checking it, turns into 1 more card, which will turn into 1 card in Soul. So every single draw trigger check is actually a +1 to Soul. Even more so when it's an Hysteric Shirley or a Spirit Inviter, since they literally go to Soul. So not only did you check 1 card that goes into Soul already, you are also drawing a card that will go into Soul. All of this will ensure that you hit your Soul requirement the second you ride Grade 3. The only exception, of course, is draw PGs, which are in here because if someone wants to rush you, you at least have something. Finally, we have 4 critical triggers. As I said, no heals, no cat stand, fuck all of those. The reason is very simple. First of all, heals mean you have less damage. And if you have less damage, that means your loop is worse. Apart from that, when they're in your hand, they literally don't do anything. They do not go to Soul. These crits don't go to Soul either, but they're the only thing that can stop a really aggressive rush. Apart from that, since this deck intends to loop the second you ride, that also means you're kind of banking on seeing at least a crit at some point, whether it's on your Grade 1 turn, your 2 turn, your 3 turn. Sometimes this is the gap closer between killing your opponent and your opponent surviving when you're only doing half a loop. Because, as I just said, you are looping when you reach grade 3, which means you don't have 5 counterblast yet, usually. If you do, awesome, but generally you don't. So these crits are basically the gap closers that put your opponent at 3 instead of 2 or something like that, so that you can then cleanly swoop them with your semi-loop, let's say. To round out grade 0s, of course, we have our enigmatic assassin, the star of the deck, part of the whole loop combo. Next up, we are running the MVP of the deck, Yellow Bolt. This card is nuts. I had never seen it in any topping DI lists whatsoever. Apparently someone once sent me a list with this card, but I had honestly forgotten. Like 3 weeks ago or so, I was just scrolling on Wiki and I found this card and was like, whoa, I reinvented water. Apparently I didn't. Because in the BCS, someone else was actually also running Yellow Bolt. Regardless, I had never seen it in any list before. This card is so nuts. Essentially, if you get it on turn 1, which you won't always, but like if you get it on turn 1 and you don't ride it, call Soul Charge 1, but you do that every single turn, so that's 3 soul already, which is insane. Apart from that, if you ride this and you're going first, you can use its skill to rest it and soul charge, and since you're not attacking anyway, you can even use it on Vanguard. You can also use it against Luard or Ange if you don't want to give them counterblast for the Ange 3 play or for Blaster Dark, and that way you still get some value out of that being on Vanguard without having to attack and give away that counterblast. But apart from that, this card by itself essentially ensures that you will always get your loop off the second you ride grade 3. And maybe it's time I do explain that, because most NLK loops essentially only get their whole loop off after striding. Like they maybe go for a Gaulish D-spoiler first, or they just have their NLK right immediately, but then they stride into Balam to set up their soul, and then after that they do their loop. The problem is that in the mirror, as I said, you will just die to RNG. But what if you're running the faster loop and they're just going for their striding, but you kill them when you ride grade 3? That's what this deck does. So having this guy is essentially 3 soul charge in 1 card, which is much better than Prisoner Beast, which everyone is running for some reason, because he's only 1 soul charge by himself. So you call him, even if you only draw him at the same timing as you would use a Prisoner Beast, it's still the same amount of soul charge. But if you draw him 1 turn before that, it's 2 or 3. Really, really insane card. This is the ace of the deck. This card, man, it is so damn good. Next up, we have 4 Dimension Creeper. If you ride this card, awesome, you get more free soul. If you just soul charge into it, cool, more free soul. If you draw into it, well, you're just gonna try to kill it so you can then root fen it back into soul. And you get the thing, it's just insane soul charging. It extends the soul charges beyond what you have in your hand. Finally, to round out grade 1s, we have the Prisoner Beast. I was just shitting on Prisoner Beast because Yellow Bolt is so much better. Regardless, we do have to fill grade 1 spots somehow, and so Prisoner Beast were my last 3. As you can see, I'm not running many grade 1s. That's because I basically hard mulligan for them. I'm running such insane amount of grade 2s that I will send away anything but 3s and 1s. So even if I have like the 2, most people would keep it because they want to go 1, 2, 3. I just assume I will draw into the 2, and that way I often have my 1 or my 3. In general though, Dark Irregular has the best grade 2s in the game. There are so many options that are super awesome, so that's why I have a very low grade 1 count. Next up, we have 4 Guin the Ripper from the V era. Essentially, when you ride him, it's a charge. When you call him, it's a charge. And if someone for some reason called a Honolly early, snipe the Honolly and you're good to go. Just like I said earlier, every single card in your hand, well, almost every single card in your hand will essentially turn into soul, and that means you will almost always have your 13 soul. Then we have 4 Rootfen. This guy, another MVP. Essentially, if you see NLK or Assassin going to your damage zone, Rootfen will then put it in your soul for you. If that didn't happen, you can just recycle Dimension Creeper with him. Overall, great card. He really adds to the consistency of the deck. Like, if you just see Assassins in your damage zone or NLK in your damage zone, you would die. There is nothing this deck can do about that unless you're running those Rootfens. Then 4 Tragic Claw. Tragic Claw essentially makes it so every single card in your hand is 1 extra charge yet again. So I would often just keep over-calling stuff in the same column to make sure that my soul hits 13 if it couldn't hit 13 by itself. Really great card. No reason to run less than 4 if you're going for that super fast build. To round out grade 2s, we have 2 Free Traveler. Now the thing is, as I said, this build does the loop when you ride grade 3. So often on your opponent's grade 2. That means you don't have a lot of damage, and so you can't run 4 of this as you would in the other type of slower builds, because you simply don't have the CB. So the maximum amount of Free Travelers you want to see in a game is 1. Sometimes you just don't get the NLK, sometimes you just don't get the Enigmatic Assassin. Now, when talking about probabilities, generally you will hit everything you need because you will be going through a large amount of your deck. You will be charging as you go through your loop. So even if you're only semi-set up, let's say you have 2 Assassins in Soul and 1 NLK in Soul, that means that as you start your loop, you will see those Assassins after a while anyway. But if you're not quite there, if you have maybe 2 Assassins but no NLK, or 1 Assassin and 1 NLK, that's when Free Traveler really saves your butt. But if you have more than that, that means you have less cards in your hand that immediately add to Soul, which then means it's possible that when you ride grade 3, you don't yet hit 13, and that is a big issue. This deck dies if it can't immediately loop, but because it is built in such a way that you are almost always hitting that number, that's not really an issue. Regardless, 2 for this reason. Finally, we have our NLK. Of course, the boss monster, the asshole everyone hates right now in Premium, and I get why, but it's not his fault. It's Assassin that absolutely needs to be limited, preferably before Worlds, because the loop is degenerate. The regular NLK deck isn't that big of a deal. It can still brick. I saw so many NLKs bricking Saturday. It was insanity. This deck didn't, because it's just a consistency fuckfest. It's so degenerate, literally. NLK just does the loop. I hope everyone by now understands why. And if you don't, just Cardfight Wiki, I guess. So to get into the tournament report, because I think it better illustrates what the deck exactly does, I will start with round 1 and 2, which was buys. I got a buy card, which I won with a Grand Blue Baskirk. That's another reason why I decided to go for this deck, because if you are running this more risky build, you don't want to run into random rogue decks that maybe just beat you by accident. However, if you're just running into meta, this deck just slaughters all of them. So because of that, I was very happy with the 2 buys, because that way this deck was more likely to face some meta. So in the 3rd round, I go up against Blasters, a really nice guy by the way, and basically he rode 3, then it was my turn, I rode 3, and I looped, and it was over. That's what this deck does. It's not even about, whoa, so lucky that you got your loop. I got my loop every single time across the whole tournament. I played this deck basically 40 games of test handing where you just play against yourself, and then maybe 150 games or more against no man. Just insanity levels of games. And this deck just wins like 95% of them. You just get your loop all the time. You really need to brick beyond imagination to not be able to do your loop. So, first round against Blasters, he did the early game thing. I ride NLK, loop, and it's over. Sadly. Then, the next round, I'm actually very, very afraid. Because what happened is, I went up against Gredora Gize. And that is one of those matchups where I'm like, damn, I could be countered right here. I don't want to be countered right here. So he got Gredora first, which again, he won the dice roll, and I was like, damn, this might be my end right here. And so what happened, he rode Gredora, but I got half a loop off. So I only had 2 damage to work with, but it was still enough to really push his hand. But at the end of my loop, instead of actually finishing it up, like calling more Assassins out of Soul, again in only 1 column, because Gredora was taking 1 column away already, and swinging with NLK, instead of doing that, I kept Assassin in Soul, and I didn't swing with NLK, because I assumed that he was keeping a G-guard for that final attack, which then meant he would be at GB2 when striding, so he could do Op Tyrannus, which then automatically would lose me the game. But so because I didn't do that, it's his turn. Now he has to attack me because his hand is so damn tiny. He has to swing, give me more damage, and I do another half a loop with 2 counterblast, which is more than enough. So again, the second I rode, I had half my loop, then he didn't die, he strode, did his thing, I got 2 damage, and I could go again. Now here's the interesting part. The whole tournament, I saw 2 strides from my opponents. Like 2 opponents got 1 stride, all my other opponents never got to stride, and I myself never strode. Because this deck doesn't have to. You ride, you loop, you win. So then in round 5, I see yet another geese, and it is Link Joker geese. And I was like, what? Am I really finding 2 counters after each other? Why? And so the guy was really friendly. He only gave me 1 damage, but he was at 2. So I ride my NLK, I do my loop with only 1 damage, so it's not really a loop, and I still won. Why? Well, what you can do when he's on 2 and he's geese, you can swing for 9 or 14. You can swing for 9 or 14. Call out an assassin, swing for 20. Call out an assassin, swing for 20. Swing with your NLK, big number, push everything in, re-ride. Call out assassin, swing with NLK, put power on the assassins, assassin, call out another assassin, assassin, call out another assassin, assassin, and then 1 assassin. And like, you just played the early game and they didn't get to striding yet. So you just did that tiny ass loop on a hand of 4 cards. And against geese, they can't check defensive triggers. So every single assassin steals 2 cards from hand. And so just like that, he sadly died before playing the game. That is what this deck is designed to do. And so I was extremely afraid of this matchup, but I just started my loop with the 1 damage because once they get to 3, they could G-guard Lakuskarina me at any moment and I would just die. So instead I immediately did it and it paid off. Now round 6, I finally get the mirror, the NLK mirror. And so just like this deck was supposed to do, I'm faster. I had 2 or 3 damage, I do my loop, and I won right there. Again, against a really nice guy. I actually love really nice opponents. So then I had my 6 wins, I was 6-0. There were only 7 rounds, so I was ensured that I would have my top 8 at that moment, since I was on table 1 and losing at table 1. In the final round means you're just in top 8, like unless something really weird happens. So I go up against Spike Brothers in the final round, but before even riding, I just scooped. Why? Well, I assumed that I would be seeing him in top 8 again, and I didn't want to give away information about his deck because everyone there basically assumed that I would be playing regular NLK until they faced me, and then maybe they would try to do something against my insane rush. So I just scooped. I was basically hoping that I wouldn't get information in the hotel because our top 8 was the next day, and then I was 6-1 and went to top 8. So the next day, top 8. My opponent is Spike Brothers, and again, really nice guy. He starts rushing me. I just happily take the damage, and then on grade 3 turn, I ride, I loop, and I won. So then I'm like, yes, we're getting closer. Like last time I lost in top 8, this time maybe after this one more win and I'm going to Worlds. So getting hella excited, I go up against my next opponent. And who is my next opponent? It is Hart from Crushing the Meta, the guy who I scooped to yesterday. So now I'm hyped as fuck because I was like, yes, my scoop helped. Right now he doesn't have information yet, and so I'm hoping that's giving me the edge. So he starts doing what Spike Brothers does. At first he doesn't want to give me too much damage, I guess, but then he started to commit to some rush. That's at least what I saw from my perspective. I end up with 2 or 3 damage. I ride grade 3, I do half a loop because I didn't have a complete one for some reason. And again, I end with all my enigmatics still in soul, so I didn't call them out because I assumed if I let him do his thing next turn, he will just stride and attack my assassins, which means I don't have counterblast for a full loop, and what the hell will I then do? So I ended with my assassins in soul, pass turn, he strides, attacks me, gives me some damage, it's my turn, I do my half a loop, and I win. This is the other game, by the way, where someone got to stride before NLK finished everything. So now I'm in the finals where I go up against Kyo, another NLK player. Interestingly enough, he also played Yellow Bolt. So I was like, what the fuck, more people play Yellow Bolt? That made me kind of afraid because I was like, wait, so does he run the same kind of deck? Regardless, he has to G-assist. But the funny thing is he didn't know that I also had to G-assist. So we both G-assisted at 1, but I made sure, because I went first, that I rode my enigmatic assassin. This way I had a 5k body, so I didn't G-assist. I was going first. I didn't G-assist at first because I wanted to start on a 5k body so that he has to basically hit me whatever happens. If I had G-assisted for an 8 and rode an 8 and then he rode a 7, like Dimension Creeper or Yellow Bolt, that would mean that I don't have damage. So I stayed at 5, didn't G-assist, let him hit me, got a damage, then it was my turn, then I G assisted, which was funny because he didn't know I had to. I guess he could assume because I rode 0, but regardless. And then I played normally up until the point where, again, I needed to ride grade 3. I did my loop and the game ended. So essentially, what I set out to do with this deck, which is basically being the faster NLK than other slower NLKs, really worked out. There is no point in running stand cat since you don't get to GB, ever. I never strode the whole tournament. There is no point to running any strides even. Whoa, I even forgot to do the deck profile portion of the G zone, but it doesn't even matter. Like, I can show you, I was running 2 G Guardians. Basically, I put them in the front because sometimes when you open a deck box, the cards may be facing your opponent, and so you open it like fuck. So it's possible that someone sees it. So I put that in the front just in case that someone saw it, so they don't immediately see this or something. So they see this, and then they can assume I'm running just a regular NLK build if they somehow figured out what the hell is going on. I don't know, I'm paranoid. But so I'm putting this in the front. I don't think anyone ever saw that I was running G Guardians, but it's just there for paranoid me. So I run 2 G Guardians, I run 1 Dust, 4 Balam, 4 Bledermaus, 2 Gilles, 1 Sherrod, 1 Demagogue, and 1 Freiheit. But as I said, I never used any of them. I never strode this entire tournament because it literally doesn't matter. The deck seeks to win the second you ride, so you never get to GB. So that's why you don't run heals, because you don't want to heal out of your win con. Your damage is your win con. Why the hell would you heal? Some people might say, oh, but I run heals because if my win con fails, the thing is, then you're already thinking about the wrong thing. You are making your win con less likely by building for if it fails. That's also why I'm not running Sullivan. Like, that Sullivan could have been a grade 2 that soul charges for me to get the whole setup. So if I were to add a Sullivan, that is maybe one more game in the whole tournament where I don't get my setup immediately and die. So no Sullivan, there's no point in Standcat because no GB, no point in G Guardians because you win before that. You're not running Stride Fodder because you're never striding. And so you basically drop every single assumption about deck building and only think about your win con. And clearly it did what I set out to do. I am extremely happy with that. And so now I am very happily going to Worlds. That is basically all I had to cover, I guess. If you have any more questions about the deck, just leave it in the comments. I'll gladly answer them. Hope you found this video interesting. Bushiroad, if you're seeing this, limit Assassin please before Worlds. Please subscribe to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I will see you soon. Ciao.